We're here. We're at Stonehenge. It's quite beautiful in some respects, isn't it? If you look at the reconstructions of this site, archaeologists and historians aren't quite sure what Stonehenge was used for. But one thing that is certain is that it marks the summer equinox and the winter solstice to a minute degree. You can, and even now, over 5,000 years since it was built, it still marks the setting of the sun and at both times of year, in the middle of winter and the middle of summer. And if you look at the aerial shots of this, when it's in a circle, the stones look like they're set out as like a clock dial would be. It's theorized that they even mark out the different months of the year. The different months of the year would be marked out in many ways like the Mayan calendar, which predicted the end of the world and also predicted eclipses of the sun. It could do that. So different cultures had a different way of marking out time, and time was so important. Imagine that you're in a cell and you've been locked up, and all your timepieces have been taken away from you. You're in solitary confinement, and the only way you could tell what time of day it was by the setting and the movements of the sun across bars in a tiny window of your cell. How would that affect you? Just have a think about that for a sec. Without timepieces and without the knowledge of time, where would we be? How would we grow our crops? How would we develop the nation? How would we develop the way that society works? We so much depend upon it nowadays, and so the people who had the knowledge of time, I suppose they would be seen as being holy and in some way spiritual leaders, because they had that knowledge. Somebody was clever enough, or a group of people were clever enough to build a timekeeping device here on the landscape, Salisbury Plain. It's fascinating, isn't it? I think if we look at the stones from this point of view, you can see them arranged almost like the minutes of a clock, the dial of a clock on that side. We're approaching perhaps the most important part of Stonehenge, and it's this bit of a phallic sticking out of the ground here. This bit, that's a really important bit. This is known as the heel stone, and this marks the point of the setting sun in the midsummer solstice and also the midwinter solstice, and this is why we know it's a time measuring device, just because of this stone. If you come to this side here, you should be able to see through the stones here, the middle stone where the sun sets and rises in midwinter, or something like that. I'm not an expert at clockmaking, I'm not an expert at watches, I'm not an expert at timekeepers, but I do get to grasp this simple knowledge. Anyway, this is why we know it is a rudimentary form of clock, and this is where all clockmaking began. If it hadn't have been for Stonehenge, you wouldn't have Prescot, for God's sake. Just learn to accept that fact.
You're looking over at the trees there, looking over the top of the heelstone. You're seeing the sunrise over the top, shining over the top of the heelstone. You're also getting a shadow effect from the heelstone creeping across the grass. and going into the middle of the monument. It's about a half a degree out now because the axis of the Earth has changed somewhat. Now jump forward 6 months to December the 21st.
Yes.
And you're standing in the middle of the stones.
Yes.
You see that stone standing at the back with the knobbly bit on top?
The knob on top, yeah.
Yeah. There was one to its left, which has now fallen down and broken in two.
Okay.
And there was a lintel across the top. So that framed a nice window. So you'd be standing watching the sun go down on the shortest day of the year, December the 21st.
And it would go down right over there.
It would go down right in the window of those stones. So they knew the shortest day of the year, they knew the longest day of the year. Once you know that, you can start to plan all the seasonal things you need to do. Best time to grow crops, when to bring your crops in, when to move your stock into different pasturing areas.
So would they be checking, you know, after so many days?
Oh well,
They'd come
they
and look?
certainly have a way of taking the days off, certainly. Yeah.
So there you have it, straight from the mouth of the English Heritage Guide. It's a clock. I wonder if anybody ever made sundials in Prescot. I know the Prescot Church used to have a 18th century sundial in the churchyard, and well, sundials were again an early form of marking time before we had the mechanical devices. So, what does this tell us about clock and watchmaking, visiting Stonehenge? Well, what it tells me is that it's a very simple thing. A clock or a watch are very simple. They're marking increments of time, and that's what a sundial does. It's what Stonehenge did over 5,000 years ago, well before the pyramids were built. Very ancient monument, and it's an innate desire for people to want to know the time, to order their days, to order their months, to order the seasons and the time of year it is. It brings order into chaos. That's basically what a clock or watch does. A timepiece. That's what timepieces do. They create order from chaos, and in doing so they have formed the very world that we live in now, and the very world that we take for granted. Every television show we watch, every YouTube video we watch is geared by time. Time is on every mobile device that you see today. It's all digital. It seems so simple, but it's taken a long time to get to, excuse the pun, a long time to get to where we are today. And before that time, before we had digitalization and all of that, we had to go through the analog mechanical invention of time, and a town that could invent time. And that's what Prescot did in many respects. It invented time. It invented machines that can create watches and devices to measure time. It did all of that, and it was the centre of watchmaking. throughout the world for a time, until other places took that place, such as America and Switzerland. They took over. But for a time in history, Prescot was at the centre of the watchmaking industry throughout the world. Talk about World Heritage. Stonehenge is a bit of a World Heritage site. Well, you could consider Prescot to be a World Heritage site of watch and clock manufacturing. And that's what this series is all about. It's exploring the history of time making, of timekeeping and watchmaking. So yeah, Ken Dodd didn't play here, like I said. Neither did William Shakespeare. I don't even think he wrote a play here. He possibly didn't even visit. John Philip Kemble certainly didn't visit here, not that we know of anyway. But I think a lot of celebrities did come here, especially in Victorian times, and certainly today. They're all here today. So yeah, that's the significance of Stonehenge. So yeah. It's very historical.